So pretty much I just want to let you talk about the team. Started the year pretty much smoking. You know, you had your first, 4 wins were big wins.
Yep.
Let's talk about how you progressed through the season.
It was we came out to a hot start. Our bats were insane. Everybody was hitting the ball. We had an average of 350 on the team, 1 through 9. It was phenomenal. Everything was clicking. And we kind of get to a low part of our year. Everybody kind of goes in their slump and whatever. And once that kind of subsided, we get back to the drawing board and go back to the basics. We're right back to where we started and came up with a few wins. We had 4 extra inning games in a row, and unfortunately came out the losing end of it. But it was kind of a wake-up call for us, and realized that we can hang out with anybody and we can compete with anybody. So it's been a roller coaster of a year.
Now, I've watched a number of your games. Can't say I've watched all of them. And I've been up in the clubhouse listening to you trying to motivate your team and the videos that you use. What do you look for when you look into that?
It's strictly motivation and get the guys thinking. Motivation to me is huge. If you don't have the family-type atmosphere and everybody believing in the same thing, there's a lot of things that could go wrong. I've been fortunate enough in my life to have a lot of people, see a lot of motivational speakers, and have a lot of people talk to me about certain things. So I kind of took what I've learned over the last 10, 15 years and brought it to these guys, and it's basically motivation to get them to understand that there's a bigger picture besides baseball. And if they can see that and realize that there is a possibility, whether it's college, whether it's going to the pros or whatever it is, that chance is available, but you got to work for it, and they got to have that motivation for it. And you know, those speeches, every time you see them come out of the clubhouse, they're all jacked up and hyped up and ready to go. And that's what we want going into the game, is them to be on cloud 9 and thinking that they can take down anybody.
You mentioned family, and you start before you go out on the field. I heard it between innings. Sometimes, you know, you stress family. Tell me a little bit more about that family and how they've responded to that.
Last year didn't go so well. It was about 50-50 bought in. Some people thought it was stupid. I kept grinding with it and kept pushing it. If we're together for a few months, right, every day, and if you don't care if you don't like each other out of baseball or wherever it may be, but if you can come together on the ball field and have that family atmosphere, where we use the example, if you go to war, who are you gonna take, right? And everybody kind of looked at me like, well, what do you mean, coach? What do you mean by that? Well, I want to know, if you go to war, who are you in this dugout or in this locker room, who are you going to take with you? Who's going to have your back? So everybody kind of started thinking about that, and that's where the whole family thing kind of come into play, is you got to have each other's back. You got to have, whether you're having a great game or a bad game, you got to have the support system in the dugout, in the locker room, on the field, off the field, in the classroom, and that's, if you don't have that, it can destroy a team. And I don't know if you pretty much seen throughout the season that these guys are very, very close, and you know, they don't always see eye to eye, but it always comes back to them being a part of a family and them being a part of a greater cause.
Let's talk about your players. And, well, before we get to the players, I want to talk about something that I heard you say after the game, the win over Capital, small ball. That's the way you've done it most of the year.
Yeah.
Tell us about small ball.
We call it constructive chaos, right? Once you kind of seen it a few times, happening at Gig Harbor, Tumwater, Timberline, Capital. If our whole goal is we want to create as much chaos as we can, and we've had 2 or 3 games where we've had bases loaded and cleared the bases, and the ball hasn't even left left the infield. Right. And we want to create as much pressure as we can, because they're all 15, 16, 17 years old. They don't quite understand what to do when things just start putting in play and start moving. And that's our whole thing, is we want to put as much pressure as we can on teams. We like to squeeze, we like to bunt. You know, that was a tough part going through the stretch where we weren't hitting as good as we should be, so we started bunting, and we were winning games and stealing bases and doing crazy stuff. I know there's a lot of people that think that I'm absolutely insane for it, but it's won a lot of our games. And creating that chaos is kind of our mentality now. We want to do whatever we can to create as much distraction and chaos on that field to get that guy at third home.
Now let's talk about your players. Solid core juniors. Only 2 seniors, so I mean, you've got at least another year of pretty good ball players.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate. We have Our core team is a bunch of juniors, and they're all starters. It's gonna be an interesting year next year, especially we have 20-some freshmen coming up, and then the sophomores that we have this year going into juniors, and the freshmen moving into sophomores. Next year is going to be very, very hard to. It's going to be an eye-opening for a lot of people. It's going to be a lot of a lot of competition to make the team. So it's going to be interesting. These guys are great fighters. They great leaders, and attitudes over the last 24 months that I've seen have changed tremendously, so I have nothing but respect for them, and they're a great bunch of guys.
So let's talk about your pitching. I can't say it's been stellar, but it has gotten the job done.
I will go ahead and say it. Our pitching is probably the best in the league right now. One thing that we have that nobody else has is we have 5 guys that can go in any ball game. And then after those 5 guys, we got 3 guys that can come in and relief at any time. Austin Ransfield, first time that Trevor Kuhn said that we're going to pitch Austin, I said, you are crazy. I'd never seen him pitch. It's kind of Trevor's pitchers is Trevor's thing, and never really see him throw, and comes out and shuts, I think it was Gig Harbor down. And he did a phenomenal job for us when our starters couldn't come out and finish the game. He's came in and done his job, and it's been phenomenal. So our starters right now, we're going to go into the playoffs as probably the top team as far as pitching staff. A lot of teams aren't going to be able to go back-to-back games like we are. And we've got it set up now where we're going to have all 4 starters for the first 2 games. And if we need them all for one game, it's great because we got 2 more guys who can finish the second game. So it's going to be interesting.
So let's talk about the playoffs. And you got their 4th seed. It's okay, I guess. I mean, you're not complaining about where you are in the playoffs.
No, if you're not the 1 seed, you want to be the 4 or 5. So that's a good thing. That's one thing we preach to all the guys at the beginning of the season. If we're not number 1, we want to be 4 or 5. And that's just the way the bracket plays out, and the way you're starting to play a numbers game at that point. And you're looking at stats and looking at who you're going to compare against, and the 4 or 5 seed are probably the most desired seed if you're not the 1, because it's the easiest way into state. You're not facing all the top teams. We're going to have to play a 2 seed, but you look at the 2 seed in the PCL or the GSHL, they are compared to what our league is. So I feel that we have a very strong advantage going into that.
Your losses this year are all 2 league opponents. That's kind of shocking to me. I mean, that means that the South Sound Conference is very tough to get by.
I would go ahead and say it's probably top 2 or 3 in the state as far as competition. You got Capital, Gig Harbor, CK. Timberline kind of fell off a little bit this year, but they're always, I mean, they beat us this year. They know how to play baseball. They're well coached. You got a great group of coaches in this conference, and it's very well organized as far as everybody wants to beat each other, and they play their best ball when they're playing 1 through 6 or 7, because you never know what you're going to get. The 7th-place team could easily beat the 1st-place team. That's just how our league is. And like I said, we've had 4 or 5 extra inning games, and where we've had the lead going into the 7th inning and somehow squandered it away and came up on the losing end of it. But you erase those and take a few mistakes away, we're sitting at the number 1 seed right now.
I've noticed a lot of times you were able to score those runs with 2 out.
Yep.
People are counting you out, and you're putting guys across the plate.
That goes back to the whole family thing, right? Everybody, we have that mentality of family never quit, never die, and it's been our goal this year is never back down, never count us out. Even when things are tough, even when things are not going like we want them to, don't give up. And that's what this team is different than any other team I've ever seen or coached in Shelton. Is they have the drive and they have the power and the willpower not to give up.
Coach, last thing to say, good luck.
Thanks, sir. Have a good one.